Questioning the rationale behind some occurrences in different parts of the world and in different space and time will make you wonder how mysterious the Earth and its occupants really are. And this is what this video wants you to feel, because here is another dose of the strangest event in history. Number 1. Dead Pope standing trial. The Vatican has always been entangled with various weird events, one not better than the other. Well, for this one, you will feel sorry for the culprit, Pope Formosus, whose corpse was exhumed not once but twice in 897. The first time was to stand trial for what he did in his lifetime. Pope Stephen VI, who was the one behind the exhumation of the corpse, as well as the judge, found Formosus to have been finely dressed in ecclesiastical robes, guilty of usurping the papacy. To plead his case, a deacon was appointed to speak on the corpse's behalf, but he himself was as silent as the corpse. To show how powerful he was, Pope Stephen VI decided to cut off 3 fingers of the corpse's right hand and bury him in a common grave, only for Pope Formosus to be dug again and this time thrown into the Tiber River. But before we get started, hit the subscribe button to stay updated. Number 2. The sausage dispute. Most of us have sausages packed everywhere. In our refrigerators and homes, you could even get some from the stores to have a good time. Not so in the early 1500s in Switzerland. Eating sausages or any meat products during Lenten fast was seen as heresy. You see, the Lenten fast is a 40 days fast leading to the Easter celebration. It started in 363 AD, and it is still practiced by Christians. Zwingli, a pastor in Zurich, was fed up with how strict the religious authorities were and wanted to test their rot. So he decided he was going to honor the sausage supper invitation of Christoph Froschauer, who was a printer and later became the first to publish the first complete Reformation Bible. The public cried foul, and Froschauer was arrested for feeding his workers sausage at that most holy time. Zwingli, though in attendance at the supper, didn't partake of it and took to the defense of Froschauer that fasting should be voluntary, not mandatory. A year later, mandatory fasting was abolished in Zurich, and Zwingli's way was done. While in Germany, the denunciation of long-standing beliefs of the Church of Rome was already full-blown, a couple of sausages were the trigger in Zurich. Number 3. Dublin whiskey fire. Dublin is notable for its love for whiskey, but this would become the undoing of 13 thirsty whiskey lovers. In 1875, a storehouse containing more than 1 million liters of undiluted whiskey, which in this era would have amounted to more than 5 million pounds, caught fire. The cause of the fire was unknown, but the explosion of all the whiskey barrels, followed by the squealing sound of pigs, alerted everyone. Very quickly, the streets were filled with whiskey, flowing from one street to another. Although no one died from the fire, even the squealing pigs, small houses were destroyed by the ever-flowing whiskey. Taking advantage of the situation to grab a free drink, people brought any vessel they could lay their hands on to the whiskey stream and scooped as much as they could. This led to 24 hospitalizations and 13 fatalities, all from alcohol poisoning, not even the fire. Number 4. Great Molasses Flood. When you thought we had seen it all from flowing streets, this time in Boston, US, more than 2 million gallons of not whiskey, but molasses flooded the street and caused far more serious catastrophe than in Dublin. While whiskey is fermented grain, molasses itself is fermented to produce ethanol and is a main ingredient in alcoholic beverages. A regular offload of molasses from the ship by Purity Distilling Company didn't go as planned on January 15, 1919. The tank containing the molasses burst open and, at a speed of 56 kilometers per h, filled the street, clearing buildings from their foundations and injuring more than 150 people. Not including dogs and horses, more than 21 people drowned in the sweet-flavored depth of the molasses, and more had to be rescued from the viscous embrace of the liquid. Even decades after the incident, you could still smell molasses on hot summer days. Number 5. A reading horse. Between the late 19th century and the early 20th century, one glimpse of happiness for Karl Kroll was his horses. Kroll was the owner of some of the most intelligent horses in Germany, but one out of many stood out so much that even psychologists and scientists stood in awe during demonstrations. Muhammad was the horse that raised the brows of people for what he could do. While most of the horses raised by Crawl could perform basic arithmetic and reading, Muhammad was a mile ahead of its pairs. He could not only perform complicated calculations using its feet to answer. The left foot is for counting tens, while the right foot is for ones. Also, some say Muhammad understood music to the extent he could decipher between discord and harmony. Still, all its intelligence couldn't save Muhammad from being lost in World War I. Number 6. Bobby Leach, not the smartest of men. Bobby Leach would head first towards the sign of danger before thinking, but he survived them all. From going over Niagara Falls in a barrel to diving from a platform of more than 150 feet into a pool, none of these orchestrated his death, but an orange peel. Apparently, Booby was the second to barrel through the Niagara Falls, but he sustained injuries that made the hospital his home for 6 months. This was his bread and butter, as being a stuntman came with these vices. Even in his 60s, Bobby was still trying to go on dangerous adventures. This time he decided to swim the whirlpool rapids of the pool hall he had, but failed. Taking time away from risky adventures, Bobby was on a tour in New Zealand when, while working in the streets, he slipped and injured his leg. Then it became so infected that it had to be amputated, and Bobby died 2 months later from its complications. Number 7. London beer flood, Ireland, and the US aren't the only places to drown the streets in alcohol. In 1814, one of the biggest breweries in London, Mew & Co.'s, saw one of their breweries, Horseshoe Brewery, give away approximately 1.4 million liters of beer to the street. The first of the 22-foot-tall wooden barrels burst, along with several other large barrels. The waving porter-beer swept into an Irish family wake held for their 2-year-old boy who died, and 5 of the mourners drowned in the beer. Also, 3 others died in neighboring houses. Altogether, 4 children and 4 adults lost their lives in the beer flood. Horseshoe Brewery almost drowned in bankruptcy, thanks to HM Excise, which rescued them. Although the company was never the same afterwards, it survived for more than 100 years, and its location became where Dominion Theatre is now. Number 8. Butter crisis in Norwegian. Butter has a special place in the hearts of Norwegians, and its scarcity has brought out how crazy people will go to get one for themselves. Because of heavy rain in the summer of 2011, cows were unable to graze properly, leading to a 20 million liter shortage in milk production. In addition, the Norwegian butter regulators didn't reduce exportation to cater for the forecasted crisis, so everything came crashing down fast. By mid-December, the prices skyrocketed to more than 40% because it is a staple in the Norwegians' Christmas diet. Seeing how desperate people were to have butter in their homes on Christmas, a newspaper offered their new subscribers half a kilogram, while some students took it to another level by auctioning butter on the internet. A Danish TV show even had to do an emergency appeal for viewers to send butter for them to give to their Norwegian neighbors. Number 9. Naked Snowman, in the year 1511, one of the most bizarre, thought-provoking, sensual snow sculptures was built. This wasn't for fun or games, it was a form of protest. It was called the Miracle of 1511. Before the Miracle of 1511, the people of Brussels were not happy with how the rich were to the poor and how separated they were from the wealthy folks of the community. They needed a change. With 6 weeks of cold weather already gone, it was time to begin building some snowmen. About 110 snowmen were built by the locals, and more than half portrayed explicit characters that were only to be seen by adults. No children should be allowed on these snow sites. Snowman and a snowwoman having a good time were built in front of the town fountain. Snow prostitutes, unicorns, and a snow virgin with a unicorn on a lap were some of the characters that stood out. Eventually spring came, and the snow melted away, resulting in flooding. But the protest got the attention of the King of France, and he donated 1,000 gold. Number 10. Tuskegee Syphilis Study, the most wicked act done in U.S. history to the African American community, was when 600 African American men were enrolled in a project with the promise of free medical care. Rather, they were treated like lab rats, and over 100 died in the process. The Public Health Service was running a study on syphilis. For the doctors to track the progress of the disease, no effective care was given to the men. A PHS investigator, Buxton, related his concerns to his superiors, and after reviewing the project, the goal was to continue until all died and autopsies were done on the dead. Seeing nothing was done, Buxton proceeded to leak the wicked plot of the PHS to a reporter, which made the public aware of this conspiracy. This led to an outrage by the public that prompted the project. But by then, 128 had died from syphilis, 40 spouses of the men had contracted it, and 19 children had it by birth. Conclusion. This is good history animations. Thank you for sticking around to the end. Which of these events made you pale?